You once believed that turning 18 would finally mean freedom, the moment you could make your own choices and be seen as an adult. But that birthday didn't bring warm hugs or proud smiles. Instead, it brought a note taped to your bedroom door. Rent due next month. No affection, no congratulations, just a cold reminder that the roof you grew up under was no longer a home, but a place you now had to earn. You told yourself you'd be fine. You worked extra hours, skipped meals, and saved every penny just to prove that you could stand on your own. Maybe then, they'd see you as someone worth loving. But one small mistake, a single dollar short, was all it took for everything to fall apart. The locks were changed. The silence that followed spoke louder than any goodbye. Can love really be measured by money? And why do we still crave approval from those who have already closed their hearts? If this story touches something inside you, take a quiet moment to like and subscribe, not just to follow a story, but to walk alongside those who have learned how to rise after being pushed away by the very people they once called family. When you were little, you used to believe that a parent's love was something certain, a truth that never changed. No matter how poor or rich, right or wrong, you believed that as long as you tried your best, your parents would always be there, arms open, ready to take you back after every stumble. That house was once your whole world, a place where laughter bounced off the walls like sunlight through the window. But sometimes, the things we think are forever only last as long as our innocence does. It began with small things. When your older brother broke a precious vase, your mother simply smiled and said, "It's all right, I know you didn't mean to." But when you spilled a cup of water, her tone shifted instantly. "Why are you always so clumsy?" Close quote. It was a simple remark, nothing sharp on the surface, yet it left a fine crack in your 80-year-old heart. You didn't understand why the same mistake led to such different outcomes. Even at the dinner table, there were invisible gaps. Your father always gave your brother the best piece of meat, asking about his grades, his future, his dreams. You sat quietly, smiling even when no one looked your way. Each time you tried to join the conversation, your words were brushed aside as if they carried no weight. That was how you learned sometimes silence was the only way to keep the peace. But silence, kept for too long, starts to hurt. You began doing everything you could to earn their approval. You studied harder, helped more around the house, and apologized even when you weren't sure what you had done wrong. Every small compliment from them felt like water in the desert, rare, precious, enough to make you believe that if you just tried harder, they might finally see you. Then, when you turned 12, the difference became impossible to ignore. Your father began talking about responsibility, close quote, saying your brother was the family's future, while you just needed to be sensible. Back then, you didn't know what being sensible truly meant, not until you realized it meant giving up your dreams. When you told him you wanted to learn music, he shook his head. "That's just a hobby. It won't feed you." Yet a few months later, he gladly bought your brother a brand new guitar, because he has talent. That night, lying in bed, you listened to the sound of the strings from the next room. Each note felt like a quiet reminder that no matter how hard you tried, love in that house was never equally shared. As the years passed, you learned to hide your sadness behind a polite smile. On the outside, you were the obedient child, the perfect student, the one who always helped others. But inside, you started to feel like a guest in your own home, careful with every step, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of taking up too much space. That quiet fear, the habit of shrinking yourself, would one day become a reason you were hurt so deeply. When you were 14, your school held an award ceremony. You received the top honor of your grade, something you had dreamed of for years. You walked home beaming with pride, holding the certificate close, imagining your parents' faces lighting up with pride. But when you stepped inside, they were watching TV. Your mother barely glanced at the paper and said, "That's nice. Just make sure it doesn't interfere with cooking dinner." Her words were light, but they extinguished something inside you. From that moment on, you understood. Sometimes the deepest pain isn't from anger, it's from indifference. When you turned 16, your brother left for college. The house grew quieter, but not warmer. Your father began complaining about bills, expenses, and responsibilities. You took a part-time job at a small cafe down the street, trying to help, hoping that easing the burden might finally make them proud. But ironically, that was when they started to see you as an adult, not in the way you wanted, but as someone who should now pay their own way. One evening, you placed your first envelope of earnings on the table, smiling nervously, expecting even a simple "good job." Instead, your father said, "Good. Now you can start taking care of yourself. This house isn't a free hotel." You forced a smile, but your heart sank. Those words, seemingly casual, were the first real crack in the foundation between you and them. From then on, your contributions stopped being gestures of love and became obligations. You paid for groceries, helped with bills, and when your paycheck was late, their eyes turned cold. If you came home late, your mother sighed, "If you're so independent, then stop making others wait." The house that once echoed with laughter became a place you wanted to escape from. Yet, despite everything, a part of you still hoped they'd notice your efforts, that one day they'd see all you did came from love, not duty. Because even if they seemed distant, you still loved them, a quiet, loyal love that asked for nothing in return except to be seen. Sometimes you remember the old days, your mother reading you bedtime stories, your father holding your hand at the park. Maybe they once loved you truly, but life, pressure, and expectation had twisted that love into something unrecognizable. Still, understanding that didn't make it hurt less. One afternoon, you overheard your father talking to an old friend. He laughed, saying, "My eldest is brilliant, his future is bright. The younger one, well, he's okay. He helps around the house." You stood by the door, frozen, unable to step in. Each word felt like a needle. Okay. That was all you were to him, just okay. You didn't want to compete, yet a small voice inside asked, "Since when did we stop being enough?" Close quote. That night, you decided you'd stop waiting for validation. You would prove your worth through your actions, even if it meant walking away someday. You opened your window and stared out at the quiet street below. The orange glow from the streetlights brushed across your trembling hands holding a tuition bill. Inside you, pain and determination coexisted, one urging you to stay, the other whispering that it was time to stand on your own. You wondered, do parents ever realize that the child they call a burden is the one quietly holding the family together? And deeper still, you asked yourself, if they truly loved me, would they ever say, "You've done enough, we're proud of you"? That question would echo through your heart for years, long after you'd grown up, long after you'd left that house behind. Still, life moved forward, as it always does. You kept studying, working, pretending that everything was fine. But deep down, you carried a quiet ache, a kind of loneliness that even a crowded room couldn't erase. You learned to smile on cue, to answer politely, to say "I'm okay" even when your voice trembled. Because in your house, showing pain was seen as weakness, and weakness was never forgiven. When you were 17, your father started leaving utility bills on the kitchen counter, a silent message that money had become part of your responsibility. You didn't complain. You just took the hint, tucked the envelope into your backpack, and worked longer hours at the cafe. Every shift left your hands sore and your feet numb, but you kept reminding yourself, it's worth it. They'll see. One night, after closing the shop, you came home past midnight. The lights were off except for a single one in the hallway. Your mother stood there with her arms crossed. "Where were you?" Close quote, she asked, her tone calm but cold. "At work," close quote, you whispered, too tired to argue. She sighed. "If you want to be so independent, then don't expect dinner waiting for you." You went to your room and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the quiet ticking of the clock. The walls that had once made you feel safe now echoed with distance. You realized that sometimes, home isn't the place that shelters you, it's the place that teaches you how to survive the world outside. As months passed, you began saving every dollar you could. Not for luxury, not even for comfort, but for a future where you could breathe freely. You dreamed of a tiny apartment, maybe one with peeling paint and second-hand furniture, but at least it would be yours. A place where no one would measure your worth by how much you paid. One afternoon, while you were folding laundry, your father walked in. "You're 18 next month," close quote, he said. "It's time you start contributing properly." You looked up, unsure what he meant. He continued, "From next month, you'll pay rent. It's fair. You live here, you should help." You nodded slowly, the words catching in your throat. It wasn't the request itself that hurt, it was the tone. There was no warmth, no acknowledgement of all the things you'd already done. Just a transaction between two people who happened to share blood. That night you stared at the ceiling, replaying his words. You thought of all the times you had cleaned the house, skipped lunch, walked home in the rain, not because you were asked to, but because you wanted to belong. And now, even belonging had a price tag. Still, you agreed. You told yourself it was okay, that maybe paying rent would make them treat you like an equal. Maybe this was the bridge between being a child and being respected. You didn't realize then it was actually the beginning of the end. There's something strange about growing up in a home that teaches you love through conditions. You learn to measure affection by approval, kindness by convenience. You become an expert at hiding pain behind gratitude. And every time someone hurts you, you tell yourself they didn't mean it because believing otherwise would shatter the only version of family you've ever known. You carried that belief like armor, convincing yourself that if you endured long enough, it would all be worth it. You didn't see how that armor was slowly turning into chains. One evening, as the sun set beyond the neighborhood rooftops, you stood by the window again, watching the faint orange light fade into gray. For the first time, you admitted to yourself that maybe love shouldn't feel like proving your worth every single day. Maybe love, the real kind, is something that lets you rest. And yet, even with that thought, you couldn't bring yourself to hate them. Because no matter how cold they became, they were still your parents. That was the cruel paradox, you longed for their affection even when it hurt you most. You exhaled slowly and whispered, almost like a promise, "Someday, I'll build a home that feels like home." If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, know this. Your value isn't defined by who fails to see it. Sometimes, the people meant to love you simply don't know how. If this story resonates with you, take a gentle moment to like or subscribe, not for algorithms or numbers, but as a quiet way of saying, "I understand." And tell me, have you ever tried twice as hard, only to receive half the love? When you turned 18, you were no longer the quiet child sitting in the corner, listening while others spoke. You had a small job, knew how to budget, and sometimes even help your parents with the household bills. You thought maybe, just maybe, they would finally see you differently, as an adult. But what you didn't know was that your newfound independence would soon become a new reason for them to add weight to your shoulders. On the morning of your birthday, sunlight filtered through the curtains and fell upon a plain sheet of paper on your desk. Scribbled across it, in your father's familiar handwriting, were the words, "Rent due on the 5th of every month." No birthday card, no cake, just that note. At first, you thought it was a joke. But when your father stepped into the room, his expression told you otherwise. "You're 18 now," he said firmly. "Time to learn responsibility." You laughed weakly. "But I'm still in school. I only work part-time," he cut you off. "We all have to start somewhere." And just like that, he walked away. That night, you sat in the dim light, staring at the paper. Part of you wanted to tear it apart. Another part whispered that maybe this was your chance to prove yourself, to earn their respect. So you folded the paper carefully and said to yourself, "I'll do it. I'll show them I can." The first few months were brutal. You worked every spare hour you had, balancing school, homework, and late shifts at a small cafe. When you handed your father the first rent payment, you waited just one word, one glance, some sign of approval. He simply nodded. When you came home from school the next day, you found a new lock on the door. You knocked. No one answered. You called for your mother, but the house stayed silent. Finally, your father opened the door a crack. "You didn't keep your end of the agreement," he said flatly. "It's just $1, you pleaded. "I'll pay it right now." He shook his head. "If you can't respect small rules, you'll never grow up." The words fell like stones. You wanted to shout, to explain, to ask why, but your throat tightened. He closed the door, not angrily, not cruelly, just firmly, as if sealing away a chapter of your life. You stood there on the porch, holding your backpack, feeling the weight of the world collapse around you. That afternoon, you wandered aimlessly through the streets, not knowing where to go. The sky darkened, and rain began to fall, slow, steady, unrelenting. You didn't run. You let the rain hide your tears, thinking maybe it could wash away the feeling of being unwanted. You asked yourself, was love always conditional? Or had I just mistaken shelter for love all these years? That night, you called a classmate and asked to stay over for a few days. He hesitated, then said yes. When he found out why, he asked softly, "How much were you short?" $1. He didn't laugh. He didn't speak. And somehow, that silence said everything. Over the next few weeks, you threw yourself into work. You told everyone you left home to become independent, that it was your decision. But late at night, lying on an old couch in your friend's apartment, you knew that wasn't true. You hadn't chosen freedom, you'd been pushed into it. Sometimes, on your way to work, you'd pass your old street. The house looked the same, curtains drawn, lights dim. You'd slow down, half hoping someone might open the door and call you back. But no one ever did. Gradually, the pain began to harden into something else. It didn't make you cry anymore, it made you stronger. You started to realize that growing up doesn't begin on your 18th birthday. It begins the moment you understand that love can't be forced and not everyone knows how to give it. You stopped blaming them. You just felt an ache that words couldn't fill. Time passed, and you began to change. The pain no longer made you crumble, it made you calm. You worked more shifts, stayed busy, saved every penny. You realized that losing your safety net had forced you to grow faster than you ever imagined. One evening, your manager at the cafe watched you wiping tables long after closing. "You're young," he said. "Why do you work like someone who's been carrying the world?" You smiled softly. "Because I didn't have much choice." He looked at you for a long moment and then nodded, as if he finally understood something unspoken. A few weeks later, he approached you again. "There's a small room upstairs," he said. "It's nothing fancy, just a bed, a window, maybe some peace. You can stay there if you'd like." You froze for a second, not sure if you'd heard him right. The offer was simple, kind, without strings attached. And for the first time in a long while, you felt something inside you loosen, a warmth you'd forgotten. That night, as you moved into that tiny space, you looked around. The walls were cracked, the floor uneven, but it was yours. The single bulb above your head flickered weakly, casting a golden glow across the room. You sat on the mattress, hugged your knees, and whispered, this feels like home. You scrolled through your phone and found old family photos, dinners, holidays, birthdays. There you were, always in the corner of the frame, smiling quietly while everyone else laughed louder, brighter. For the first time, you didn't feel the need to belong in those pictures. You just felt grateful that you had learned something from them, that home isn't a place. It's a feeling. You still send money to your mother sometimes. Not out of duty, but out of gratitude. Because despite everything, you refused to let bitterness define you. You chose kindness even when kindness hadn't been shown to you. One night, as you finished your shift, you saw your father standing outside the cafe. He wasn't angry. He just looked unsure. The two of you stood there in silence for a long moment. Finally, he said quietly, I just wanted to make sure you're doing all right. You nodded. I'm okay. And for the first time in years, you saw something flicker in his eyes, maybe regret, maybe pride, maybe both. That night, you walked back to your small room under the city lights, your heart strangely light. You realized that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from the weight of what could have been. You sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street below, and whispered to yourself, they taught me how to survive, even if they didn't mean to. And maybe that's enough. If someone were to ask you now, do you hate them? Close quote, you smile and say, no. Because if not for them, I would never have learned how strong love can be when it comes from within. Some wounds never scar on the outside, but they shape the soul in silence. And you, the one who was locked out for being $1 short, have now learned to open every door in your life with your own hands. If this story touched something deep in you, take a quiet second to like or subscribe, not for numbers, not for trends, but as a way of saying, I understand this kind of pain, and I'm healing too. Now tell me, if the people you love put a price on affection, would you stay to prove your worth, or would you walk away to find yourself? That summer, the city shimmered under the glow of neon lights and the aroma of roasted coffee from the cafe where you worked. You had grown used to this rhythm, the sound of the espresso machine, the regulars with their same old orders, the quiet satisfaction of earning your own way. Life was modest but peaceful, and somewhere deep inside, you started to believe that maybe things were finally getting better. Every evening, you would sit by the window of your small room, looking down at the slow river of headlights below. You told yourself that peace was real this time, that maybe you had left the chaos behind. But life has a strange way of testing you right when you start to heal. And this time, the test came from the past you thought you'd escaped. It happened on a busy afternoon. The cafe was full, the clinking of cups blending with conversation, when you heard a voice behind you, one that froze your entire body. Oh, so my son works here now. Close quote. That voice, deep, familiar, and heavy with authority, belonged to your father. You turned around, your heart hammering in your chest. He stood there with a few men, colleagues perhaps, laughing and chatting as if this was a casual surprise. You forced a small smile and greeted him. Hi, Dad. He glanced around and then said to his friends, half joking, half serious, he's just working here for experience. Got to let him see how hard real life is, teach him the value of money. The words echoed in your mind long after he said them. The people around stopped talking for a moment, their eyes flickering toward you. Some pitied you. Others smirked. You stood there, tray in hand, trying to keep your face still. You didn't say a word. You just nodded politely and walked away, your fingers gripping the tray so tight they turned white. A coworker brushed past you and whispered, you okay? Close quote. You nodded again. Yeah, I'm fine. But you weren't. You could still hear the echo of his voice, not cruel, not loud, but sharp enough to split something inside you. You realized that some wounds don't come from what people do, but from how easily they can make you feel small. When the rush finally died down, you quietly cleaned the table where he had sat. There was an unfinished cup of coffee and a few coins left behind. As you reached for them, one coin slipped from your hand, rolling across the table and falling to the floor with a soft clink. It was a tiny sound, yet it sliced through the air like a memory, the sound of one missing dollar, the locked door, the silence that followed. That night, you sat in your room staring at that same coin in your palm. It glinted faintly under the dim light, mocking and familiar. You realized that what hurt the most wasn't public humiliation. It was the understanding that even now, after everything, your father still didn't see you not as an equal, not as someone who had tried, but as a lesson to be taught. You thought about all the years you had spent trying to earn approval. Every compliment, every nod from him had been a reward. You thought growing up meant finally being seen, but maybe, to him, you'd always be that child who needed correction. You laughed softly, the kind of laugh that hurts. Maybe, close quote, you whispered, real growth begins the moment you stop needing to be understood. The following days blurred together. You went to work, smiled at customers, wiped tables, and pretended you didn't hear the whispers. But every night, when the cafe was quiet, you could feel the ache settle in again, not the sharp kind, but the heavy, quiet one that sits in your chest and doesn't move. A week later, your manager noticed the fatigue written all over your face. "Something's wrong," he said gently. "You've been distant lately." You shook your head. "I'm okay." But when you got home that night, you finally let go. You didn't cry out loud, you just sat at a small wooden desk, your hands over your face, breathing slowly, as if holding everything inside would stop it from spilling over. In the dim light, you thought about your father's eyes when he looked at you that day, calm, distant, unbothered. And you realized something painfully simple. Maybe he didn't even mean to hurt you. Maybe, in his mind, he thought he was teaching you something. But intention doesn't erase the wound. Sometimes, the people who wound you the deepest truly believe they're helping. A few weeks later, the cafe got a new catering job for a large corporate event. You were chosen as team lead for your discipline and precision. It felt like a small victory, like the world was finally starting to reward your quiet persistence. You told yourself this was your chance, a step forward, a moment that belonged entirely to you. But fate wasn't finished yet. When you walked into the venue that night, dressed neatly in your new uniform, you glanced at the guest list and froze. Your father's name was on it. Your breath hitched. For a moment, you considered leaving, but you couldn't. You needed the job, and you needed to prove, if not to him, then to yourself, that you could stand there with dignity. When he arrived, your eyes met. There was a brief flicker of surprise in his expression, quickly masked by a polite nod. He looked away, as if you were just another stranger doing their job. You kept your smile, though your hands trembled slightly as you carried trays through the crowd. Throughout the evening, he avoided you. You avoided him. The space between you felt wider than the years that had passed. And then, near the end of the night, something happened that you would never forget. As the event neared its end, one of your co-workers accidentally spilled a glass of water on a guest suit, your father's. The room fell silent for a heartbeat. You rushed forward, instinctively reaching for a napkin. "I'm so sorry, sir," you said quickly, your voice calm despite your shaking hands. Your father looked at you just for a moment and something flashed across his face. Discomfort, maybe embarrassment. Then, with everyone watching, he stepped slightly back and said coldly, "No need. I don't appreciate employees acting too familiar." The air went heavy. The laughter, the music, everything seemed to vanish. You froze, napkin in hand, realizing what he had just said. Around you, people exchanged looks. You could feel the pity like 1,000 needles on your skin. You lowered your gaze and whispered, "Understood, sir." Then you turned away, finishing your shift in silence. When the last guest left, you cleaned up the empty tables, one by one. The sound of glasses clinking together echoed faintly in the room. You didn't cry. You couldn't. The pain had gone beyond tears, it had turned into a strange kind of clarity. Walking home that night, the streets were quiet. A soft wind moved through the trees, brushing your face gently, as if to say, you did nothing wrong. You looked up, the sky was grey, no stars, no moon. And for the first time, you accepted that silence could break a heart just as much as words. You stopped at a street corner and opened your phone. There was an unsent message you had typed weeks ago. "I miss home." You hovered over the screen, then deleted it. Not because you didn't miss them, but because you finally knew missing someone doesn't always mean you should go back. The next morning, your manager called you into because kindness is not weakness. It's the strength of those who have felt pain and still refuse to pass it on. If you've ever been made to feel small, if someone once tried to strip you of your worth, remember this. Your silence can speak louder than their cruelty. And if this story resonates with you, take a quiet moment to like or subscribe, not for numbers or fame, but as a way of saying, "I understand. I've been there too." Tell me, have you ever had someone you love make you feel invisible? And when it happened, did you stay quiet, or did you stand tall? That night after the banquet, you barely slept. The wind slipped through the cracks in the window, mixing with the distant hum of cars, a quiet symphony heavy with memory. Every sound brought back the same scene, your father's distant eyes, the murmurs of the guests, and your trembling voice as you said, "I'm sorry, sir." A simple sentence, yet it had separated you from the person you once were. You sat up, leaning against the wall. The streetlight outside cut your face in half, one side in shadow, one side in gold, a reflection of the battle inside you. Half of you wanted to forgive him. The other half wanted to erase everything. But between those two halves was a hollow you didn't know how to fill. Days passed. You moved slower. You still went to work, still smiled, still followed the routine, but inside, you were standing in the eye of a storm. The calmer you tried to appear, the louder the questions became. Why did he do that? Did he ever regret it? Did I deserve this? One night, you found an old notebook in your drawer, the one you used as a child. Inside were pages filled with tiny handwriting. "When I grow up, I want to be a musician. I'll buy Mom a new dress someday. The words were crooked and innocent. You traced your fingers over them and smiled faintly. Where was that child now, the one who believed love was unconditional, the one who thought effort was always rewarded? Somewhere along the way, you had lost that version of yourself. It didn't make you weak. It made you human. You realized that growing up sometimes meant burying the parts of you that once made life simple. One evening after your shift, you wandered to the riverside. The city still buzzed behind you, but there, the wind was softer. You sat by the edge, watching the ripples glow under the dim streetlights. Across the river, you saw a house with a single yellow light burning through the window. For a second, it reminded you of home, of a time when you used to believe that light meant warmth. You whispered to yourself, if he could see me now, would he be proud? Or would I still just be the kid who came up $1 short? A tear rolled down your cheek. You didn't wipe it away. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was release. In the weeks that followed, you began to write not diary entries, but letters. Letters to your father, to your mother, to yourself. You didn't send them. You just folded each one carefully and tucked it into a small box. But with every letter, a part of the heaviness inside you eased. One of them read, I used to think you didn't love me. But maybe you just didn't know how. And maybe I never learned how to stop searching for that love. One evening, you came across a quote that changed something inside you. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the past imprison the present. You read it over and over, until the words no longer felt like someone else's, they felt like yours. Forgiveness. 2 syllables that carried the weight of your entire life. Then one morning, an elderly man sat at the cafe table near the window. He smiled at you. You've been working here long? Close quote, almost 2 years, close quote, you said. You must meet a lot of people, huh? Close quote. You nodded. Yes, sir. Everyone who comes in brings their own story. He chuckled softly, then said something that made your heart stop. People may forget what coffee they drank, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That sentence stayed with you for days. As you made lattes, cleaned tables, and greeted customers, it echoed in your head. And then it hit you, your worth wasn't defined by who recognized you, but by how you treated others. You had given warmth to strangers, respect to co-workers, comfort to the broken things your father, with all his authority, had never managed to give. That night, as you wiped the fogged mirror in your tiny bathroom, you saw your reflection, tired but steady, winded but alive. You whispered, I forgive you, Dad. Not because you deserve it, but because I need peace. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was quiet, but real. And somehow, when you said it, something deep inside finally loosened. Weeks later, your phone rang. It was your mother. Her voice trembled slightly. How have you been, honey? Close quote. You paused, then smiled. I'm good, Mom. I'm doing well. She sighed in relief. Your father, he talks about you a lot these days. You didn't ask what he said. You simply replied, I know. The call ended, but you sat there for a long time afterward. Maybe, you thought, sometimes what we need isn't an apology, just proof that we're still remembered. From that day, you began to see your story differently. You were no longer the victim. You were the survivor. You realized that the past can't be erased, but it can be rewritten not by changing the events, but by changing their meaning. One afternoon, a new waitress joined the cafe. She was young, nervous, and on her first day, she spilled coffee on a customer's shirt. She burst into tears. You walked over, smiled, and said gently, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes the first time. Her eyes softened with gratitude. And as you walked away, you understood healing doesn't always come from forgetting what hurt you. Sometimes, it comes from becoming the person you once needed. That night, you opened your notebook again and wrote one line. Healing begins when we stop waiting to be saved and start saving ourselves. Slowly, your life began to feel different. You read more, took walks after work, treated yourself kindly. Every morning, when you looked in the mirror, you didn't see someone searching for approval. You saw someone who had finally learned their worth. One evening, a customer asked you, are you planning to do this job forever? Close quote. You smiled. No. But right now, it makes me happy. He nodded, surprised by your calmness. And for the first time, you realized you were proud of your answer. You no longer needed validation. Because now, you knew. The most important approval is the one that comes from within. If someone asked you, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? Close quote. You'd say, learning to forgive people who never apologized and to love myself when I felt most unwanted. That night, you stood on your balcony, looking up at the scattered stars. For once, they didn't feel far away. Maybe when you open your heart, the universe leans a little closer to just enough to leave a bit of light. If you've ever been hurt by someone you love, remember this. You still have the right to peace. Let your past teach you strength, not keep you trapped in pain. And if this story found a reflection of your own inside it, take a gentle moment to like or subscribe, not for algorithms, but as a quiet whisper that says, I'm healing too. Now tell me, if someone once hurt you deeply, do you think you could forgive them not for their sake, but for your own? Time moved on quietly. Each day looked the same from the outside, but something within you had shifted forever. Before, you lived to prove yourself. Now, you simply wanted to live fully, honestly, freely. You no longer lost sleep replaying your parents' voices in your head. The constant why had faded into silence. It wasn't that you stopped caring, you had simply learned that peace sometimes comes from letting unanswered questions remain unanswered. One morning, as you prepared for work, your manager smiled and said, I'd like you to help train the new hires. You've been doing great. You blinked, surprised, then nodded. The pride you felt wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet, the kind that blooms when you realize you no longer need validation to feel worthy. The new hire assigned to you was a small, timid girl with nervous hands and eyes that darted around like she was always expecting to be scolded. She spilled coffee twice in her first hour. Instead of anger, you smiled. It's okay, close quote, you told her gently. We all start somewhere. Her shoulders relaxed. You could almost see the weight lift off her. Watching her, you suddenly saw yourself, the frightened version of you who once thought every mistake meant failure. And in that moment, you understood something you never had before. Sometimes we don't need to be saved. We just need someone who reminds us not to give up. Over time, she became more confident, more cheerful. And strangely, your own happiness grew alongside hers. You realized joy didn't come from being praised, but from helping someone else believe they could stand too. One evening, after closing, she asked quietly, were you always this calm? You never seem angry. You smiled. Of course I get angry. But I learned something: anger doesn't make people understand you. It only drains you. It's easier to turn that energy into something good. She looked down, hesitating, then said softly, you talk like my dad would have if he was still alive. The words caught you off guard. A breeze drifted through the open door, carrying the faint smell of roasted beans. You didn't ask for details. You just replied, then live in a way that would make him proud. That night, as you sat by your window, watching headlights blur into streaks of gold, you thought, maybe maturity isn't when the pain stops, maybe it's when you can turn that pain into empathy. Weeks passed. You were offered more responsibility. The cafe owner planned to open a new branch and wanted you to manage it. You froze, overwhelmed not with fear, but disbelief. Who would have thought that the same kid who was once kicked out over a missing dollar would one day be trusted to run a business? You accepted. Not to prove anything, but to quietly acknowledge how far you had come. The morning of your first day at the new cafe, you opened the doors early. Sunlight streamed in through the glass, lighting up the freshly painted walls and the smell of new wood. You breathed deeply. Everything around you was new, yet inside you still lived an old memory, the echo of a locked door, the chill of that first night alone. Every morning, when you brewed a first pot of coffee, you thought of home. Your mother's quiet hum in the kitchen, your father reading the newspaper. The images didn't hurt anymore. They were no longer sharp edges, just faded photographs inside your heart. One evening, as you were cleaning up before closing, a man walked in. The sun was low, his face half hidden by the light. Black coffee, close quote, he said. Your hands froze. You didn't need to see clearly. You knew that voice. It was your father. For a moment, you couldn't move. You stood there, cup in hand, heart pounding. He looked almost the same: upright posture, composed expression, the same air of quiet authority. You made the coffee slowly, afraid even the sound of the spoon might break the fragile air between you. When you placed the cup in front of him, you said softly, your coffee, Dad. He looked up, startled for a moment, then nodded slightly. Neither of you spoke. The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of the wall clock and the faint hiss of steam from the... After he left, you sat alone, staring at the half-finished cup still releasing faint curls of steam. You reached out, feeling the warmth against your fingertips. It wasn't just coffee, it was closure. That night, you wrote one last letter. Dad, I no longer hold anger. If not for that day you made me leave, I might never have learned how to stand on my own. Thank you. Because even though it came late, I finally got what I needed: your acknowledgement. You folded the letter, placing it in the same box that once held all your pain. But this time, you didn't lock it. You no longer needed to. You were free. From that day forward, you worked harder, not out of obligation, but out of love for what you did. Each smile from a customer, each aroma of freshly brewed coffee, felt like a tiny reminder that life was still beautiful. One morning, the young barista asked, do you ever feel afraid of the past? Close quote, you smiled. No. I just fear forgetting what it taught me. She looked at you, speechless. And in her silence, you saw yourself years ago, lost, searching, but still trying. If someone asked you now, what moment changed you the most? Close quote, you say, the moment I realized that forgiveness isn't the end of pain, it's the beginning of freedom. Because only when you release what hurts you, can you truly walk forward without chains. So if you still carry a wound that hasn't healed, remember, no one else can heal it for you. The past does not define you. What defines you is how you rise after the fall. If this story touched something deep within you, take a quiet second to like, not for algorithms, but as a gentle way to say, I've been there, and I'm stronger now. And if you'd like to walk alongside more stories of strength and redemption, subscribe, not out of habit, but because every story here is a hand reaching out, reminding you that you are not alone. And you. If the person who once hurt you came back someday, carrying a late apology, would you accept it, or would you simply smile and walk forward? That morning, the sky was unusually clear. The sunlight wasn't harsh, it was soft, warm enough to touch the leaves still carrying dew. You opened the cafe doors, inhaled deeply, and for the first time in years, you truly felt at peace. There were no more dreams about a locked door, no more lonely nights beneath the rain. Everything that once haunted you seemed to have been left behind somewhere far away. Now, each breath, each heartbeat reminded you. You were alive not to escape, but to continue. Since the day your father came to the cafe, you hadn't seen him again. But that single meeting was enough to close an old chapter. You no longer needed long conversations or perfect apologies. Just that look, the one that carried awkward honesty and something that resembled love, was enough. Some wounds don't need to be healed. They just need to be acknowledged. And once they are, the heart can finally let go. You began to live slower, listen more, and smile easier. In the mornings, you made yourself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched sunlight slip through the blinds, painting your hands in gold. That familiar aroma no longer carried memories of pain, it now filled you with gratitude. Because from loss, you had learned how to cherish the small things. One afternoon, the young barista you had trained came to say goodbye. She was being transferred to another branch. Before she left, she held your hand and said, "Thank you. I don't think I would have lasted this long without you." You smiled softly. "You would have. I just reminded you of what you already had." As she walked away, you watched her go, feeling light. You realized then that kindness never dies. It lingers in the lives it touches, in the hearts it softens. Maybe that's what rebirth truly means, not forgetting the past, but turning it into something better for the present. Soon after, you enrolled in an advanced barista course. There, you met people from all walks of life. A woman who left her office job to chase a dream, a young man who left home to find freedom, a mother learning again after a divorce. Each of them carried their own quiet wounds, yet when they spoke, their voices were calm, even peaceful. You understood something. Everyone carries cracks within them. But it's through those cracks that light finds its way in. During the final class, the instructor said, "A good cup of coffee doesn't come from the beans, it comes from the heart of the one who makes it. If your heart isn't at peace, the taste will never be right." You smiled and nodded. Maybe life worked the same way. One evening, after your shift, you walked through the nearby park. Children laughed, couples strolled hand in hand, old people rested on benches. You sat quietly, watching them, and felt a calm warmth inside. The world, despite all its noise and flaws, was still beautiful. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of flowers. You closed your eyes and listened to the laughter, to the rustle of trees, to life itself moving softly around you. And you knew, deep down, you had finally stepped out of the dark. A friend once asked you, if you could go back, would you change anything? Close quote, you thought for a moment and replied, no. Because without all of it, I wouldn't be who I am now. You didn't say it to sound wise. You said it because it was true. Sometimes pain is what shapes us into people capable of loving more deeply. One morning, you received a message from your mother. Your father just had his checkup, he's fine. He said if you are free, come home for dinner. You stared at the words for a long time. Not because you were hesitant, but because you wanted to feel them fully. Then you typed back, "I'll come." That evening, you returned to the house you hadn't entered in years. Everything looked the same, the old wooden chair, the small dining table, the framed family photo on the wall. Your father was setting the dishes. He looked up and said, quietly, "You're home." You nodded, smiling. "I'm home." Dinner that night was simple. No apologies, no tears. Just small talk about work, the neighborhood, your mother's cooking. Yet in those ordinary exchanges, something had changed. The air felt lighter, warmer. You were no longer strangers separated by pride. You were a family learning how to speak again. When the meal ended, your father poured you a cup of tea. He didn't say anything, just set it down in front of you. You looked at the steam rising from the cup and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." He nodded. "Thank you too." 4 short words, yet they carried everything unsaid. From that day on, you and your parents began talking more often. Not about the past, just about small, ordinary things. And somehow, that was enough. You no longer needed explanations. You only needed to know that everyone, in their own way, was trying. You didn't wish for the past to disappear. You only wished for the present to be gentle enough to heal what had once been broken. One quiet night, you returned to the cafe. The lights reflected softly on the glass doors, and laughter from customers filled the air. You stood there for a while, watching it all, realizing how small you were in this wide world, but this time, that smallness didn't make you lonely. It made you feel connected. You smiled, opened your notebook, and wrote a single line. Life doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And if I've been hurt, it only means I've learned to love better. You closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and stepped out into the night. The wind brushed through your hair, carrying with it the faint scent of coffee and something else, the scent of life, of hope. That night, you looked up at the sky. It was full of stars, scattered like memories you no longer feared. You didn't wish upon them. You didn't ask for anything. You simply thought, thank you for everything that once hurt me, because it taught me what happiness truly is. If someone were to ask you now, have you forgotten it all? Close quote, you would smile and say, no, I haven't forgotten. But I've forgiven. Because forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about walking forward without letting the past hold your hand anymore. You are no longer the person who begged for love, nor the one who feared rejection. You are the one who learned how to stay kind, even after being broken. You are the one who turned pain into purpose. And maybe that's what rebirth really is, not a beginning, but a return to yourself, gentler, wiser, freer. If this story made your heart feel a little lighter, take a quiet moment to like, not for algorithms, but as a whisper that says, I, too, am healing. And if you wish to keep walking with stories like this, stories of faith, courage, and quiet kindness, subscribe not out of habit, but because sometimes, one story is enough to change an entire day. Now tell me, after everything, do you believe people can truly be reborn? Not by starting over, but by learning to live again, peacefully. Time went on, and your life seemed ordinary on the surface, opening the cafe each morning, greeting customers, brewing coffee, smiling as they left. But there was something different now. Your smile was no longer a mask to hide the pain. It had become a part of who you truly were. Perhaps that's the quiet miracle of time. It doesn't erase our wounds, but it teaches us how to live peacefully with them. One morning, while wiping the counter, you noticed a middle-aged man standing outside. His shirt was worn, his shoes scuffed, his face tired. You walked out and asked gently, "Can I help you, sir?" Close quote, he smiled weakly. His voice was rough. "I just need a quiet place to sit, maybe a warm drink." You nodded, guiding him in. A few minutes later, you placed a steaming cup of tea before him. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted it. "It's been a long time since anyone made me tea like this," close quote, he whispered. That single sentence struck something deep in you. For a brief moment, you saw your younger self, the one who used to wish for someone to simply look at you with kindness. You smiled and said softly, "From now on, this place will always be open if you need somewhere to rest." After that, the man became a quiet regular. He never talked much. He would sit in his usual corner, sometimes reading, sometimes just staring out at the street. One day, he told you he had once been a teacher, that he'd lost everything, his job, his home, his family, in just a few years. "People say time heals," close quote, he said with a half smile, "but sometimes, time just teaches you to hide a pain better." You didn't interrupt. You didn't try to comfort him. You just sat there. Because sometimes, the greatest comfort isn't words, it's presence. One morning, he arrived later than usual, carrying a small notebook. "This is for you," close quote, he said. "I used to write down every act of kindness people showed me. Now I want to start writing about the kindness you show to others." You took the notebook, your heart tightening. That night, you opened it. The first page read, in shaky handwriting, "Today, a simple cup of tea reminded a weary heart what kindness tastes like." You closed the book and smiled through the quiet. Sometimes, one small act can change an entire day, even an entire life. From then on, you began to notice more deeply the faces around you. The young woman crying silently in the corner, the man typing on his laptop late into the night, the old lady who paused outside just to breathe in the smell of coffee. Each of them carried their own story, their own unseen weight. And you realized the world isn't as cold as people think. It's just that we've stopped seeing each other. One day, you placed a small wooden box on the counter with a note that read, "If you feel tired today, leave your sadness here. I'll keep it safe for you." At first, no one paid attention. But slowly, the box began to fill up little folded notes, scrawled words, sometimes just a single name. "Mom. Lonely. I'm sorry." Each night after closing, you opened the box, read every note, and placed your hand over your heart, whispering, "You're not alone." You never knew if the people who wrote them ever came back. But you believed that by writing, they had already taken their first step toward healing. One rainy evening, as you were cleaning up, a girl about 15 came in, drenched from head to toe. She sat in silence for a long time, then asked softly, "Can I ask you something? If someone hurt you a long time ago, but you still miss them every day, is that wrong?" Close quote. You looked at her, those eyes, filled with confusion and pain, were familiar. You saw your younger self again. You said, "No, it's not wrong. Missing someone means your heart still remembers how to love." As the days passed, your cafe quietly became a resting place for weary souls. No one promised happiness there, but everyone knew inside those walls, they could breathe, pause, and be seen. One afternoon, the young barista you once trained came back to visit. "Guess what?" Close quote. She said, smiling. "I opened my own cafe. And I put a little box on my counter too. It says, if you're sad, you can leave your sadness here." You laughed, your heart swelling with pride. Because light once shared always multiplies. A crisp autumn morning arrived, golden leaves swirling at your feet. As you swept the path in front of your cafe, the same middle-aged man returned. He looked healthier, steadier, with warmth in his eyes. In his hands, he held that old notebook. "I added a few more lines," close quote, he said. "This time, about myself." You opened it, reading the latest entry. "Today, I smiled, truly smiled for the first time in years. Maybe kindness never disappears. Maybe it just waits to be awakened." You looked up. The two of you shared a quiet smile, the kind that needed no words. You both understood when a person learns gratitude, even after losing everything, peace finally has a place to stay. That evening, you brewed your last cup of coffee for the day. You stood behind the counter, watching people hurry past outside, each one carrying an untold story, a joy, a sorrow, a new beginning. And suddenly, you thought back to your 18-year-old self, the one who stood in front of a locked door, trembling, believing that a missing dollar had defined his worth. You smiled softly. No, you wouldn't change a thing. Because that single missing dollar had given you the most precious truth. That your value was never measured by what you owned, but by how you rose when you had nothing left. Night fell. You turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped into the street. Above you, the same sky stretched wide, but tonight, it looked different. Brighter, closer, warmer. Perhaps that's what happens when the light finally returns to your heart. The world mirrors it back to you. You took a deep breath, and a thought came quietly, like a whisper carried by the wind. If someone asked me why I still believe in life, I'd say because I've seen the dark, and that's how I learned to cherish the light. Every morning since, when you open your cafe doors, you don't just welcome customers, you welcome yourself. The you who survived. The you who forgave. The you who found peace. And if a tired stranger sits silently in the corner, eyes filled with the same exhaustion you once knew, you'll simply smile and say, "It's okay. You can rest here for a while." Because now, you understand better than anyone, everyone has a journey back to the light. And sometimes that journey begins with nothing more than a warm cup of coffee and a gentle smile. One cold winter morning, as you opened the cafe, your breath came out in soft white clouds. The sun hadn't risen fully yet, and only a pale light brushed across the windows. The cafe was quiet, only the faint aroma of coffee drifted through the air. You paused for a moment, looking around. Every table, every framed photo, every little corner held a memory. The scratches on the wooden counter, the faded marks on the wall, they all told your story. From the shaky days when everything felt uncertain, to the lonely nights cleaning the floor alone, to this morning when peace had quietly taken root in your heart. You brewed yourself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. Outside, people hurried past, bundled in coats, their hands buried in pockets. You watched them, a faint smile forming on your lips. You wondered how many of them were hiding silent pain, just like you once did. And how many were searching for a place to pause, breathe, and remember that they were still seen. As the morning sun slowly filled the room with warmth, you opened the old notebook the teacher had given you. On the last page, you wrote a line. "Maybe happiness isn't a destination, but a moment of gratitude, the moment we realize we're still here." Years passed quietly after that. Life became calm, not dull, the kind of calm that follows a storm, when the air finally feels clean. Your cafe became a familiar part of the neighborhood, not because it was fancy or popular, but because it held something rare. Warmth. People didn't just come for coffee. They came for hope. Some left cheerful notes. "I got promoted today." Close quote. Others left tender ones. "I finally forgave myself." And sometimes, the ink on a crumpled piece of paper was blurred by tears. "I missed someone, but I no longer hate them." You read them all slowly, carefully, as if each one were a mirror reflecting both their story and your own. One evening, while cleaning, you found an old photograph tucked between some books. It was you at 18, standing in front of that old house. A boy with tired eyes, trying so hard to be brave. You stared at the picture, feeling both distant and close to that person. He once thought his life had ended when he was pushed away over a missing dollar. But now, looking back, you smiled. If you could speak to that version of yourself, what would you say? Maybe this: don't be afraid. Everything will change, not how you expect, but in ways that will make you grateful someday. When dusk fell, the cafe filled with a gentle hum of voices. A group of students laughed over their dreams, a woman read quietly by the window, and in the familiar corner sat the teacher again, older now, hair more silver than before, but his eyes bright and steady. He lifted his cup of tea, smiling. You see, life is like tea. Bitter at first, but if you wait long enough, the aftertaste turns sweet. You smiled back. And once we learn to wait, everything begins to soften. Later that night, you closed the shop and went for a walk. The cold air was crisp but kind. Streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement, still glistening from the rain. You walked slowly, letting the wind move through your hair, feeling your heartbeat steady and calm. There was a strange but beautiful stillness in your chest, not joy, not sorrow, something deeper. It felt like standing on the quiet edge between what was and what's to come. Every hurt, every scar, every silence had turned into something soft, a quiet kind of light. You stopped by the river. The water was still, reflecting the golden glow of distant lamps. And suddenly, your father's words echoed in your mind. Life is a long journey, son. Every scar is a marker. Keep walking, and it'll lead you home. Now, you finally understood. Life isn't a race to win, it's a path to understand. None of us walk through it without wounds. But if we learn to look at them with gratitude, we realize something beautiful. The wound is where the light begins. One afternoon, while you were brewing coffee, a young woman walked in. You recognized her immediately, the teenage girl who once came in from the rain, asking if missing someone who hurt her was wrong. She smiled brightly. Do you remember me? Close quote. You laughed. Of course. You're the girl who asked about loving someone you couldn't forget. She nodded. I understand it now. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about not letting the pain control you anymore. You looked at her, emotion rising quietly in your chest. That same girl who once carried storms in her eyes now stood in front of you, steady and shining. As she left, you thought every person who passes through our lives leaves a piece of light behind. Small or faint, maybe, but when you gather them all together, they form something whole. Something called hope. That night, you opened the familiar notebook again and wrote, I once thought I was just a survivor. But now I know I am reborn each time I choose love. Outside, the wind was cold, but in your heart, it was spring. One morning near the end of the year, a letter arrived from your mother. Her handwriting trembled slightly. Your father often talks about your cafe. He says every time he drinks coffee, he remembers that day years ago. He told me that maybe we were both wrong back then, but he's grateful you never stopped believing in good things. You read the letter, eyes blurring softly, not with sadness, but with quiet joy. Sometimes what we need isn't an apology, but a simple acknowledgement that love had been there all along. That evening, you brought the letter to the cafe, placed it beside a steaming cup of coffee, and whispered to yourself, I'll keep living like this, gently, kindly, with gratitude. Through the window, you saw a young woman helping an old man cross the street, a child holding his grandmother's hand, an elderly couple walking side by side beneath the fading sun. The world, you realized, was still achingly beautiful. Maybe the miracle of life isn't that we avoid a darkness, but that we still choose to love even while standing in it. Later that night, before bed, you looked out the window. The moon hung full and golden. In its soft glow, you almost saw your younger self, alone but brave, uncertain but still walking forward. You smiled. If someone were to ask, what do you wish for tomorrow? Close quote, you'd answer, nothing big. Just a smile at the world and hope it smiles back. Because happiness isn't found in perfection. It lives in how we see life, with gentler eyes and a heart that no longer fears. You closed your eyes, took a deep breath, and before sleep found you, you made a quiet promise. No matter what tomorrow brings, I will live with kindness. I won't let the things that once broke me take away my ability to love. Outside, dawn began to rise, soft, golden, unhurried. A new day, a new beginning. And somewhere, between the heartbeat of morning and the warmth of light, a quiet vow echoed through the air. I will keep lighting this world even if all I have is a single flame. Life, in the end, is a journey of mornings and evenings where we learn, little by little, to let go and to love. You once walked through darkness, fell to the ground, and thought you'd never rise again. Yet now, looking back, you understand. The days that broke you were also the days that built you. No one is born strong. Strength is learned when we can smile through the ache, when we can thank the things that once hurt us, because they taught us how to cherish life and to love more deeply. Light doesn't always arrive as a blaze. Sometimes, it's a small flicker inside the heart that refuses to go out. Even on some nights, you placed your hand on your belly and whispered to your baby, I promise I will protect you. Even if I have to start from nothing, I will never let you lack love. These words weren't only for the child. They were for you, too, soothing your spirit, fueling you with strength to face another day. Then one day, a message from your sister arrived. Just a few careless words. "Your old room looks so nice now." For anyone else, it might have meant nothing. But for you, it cut deep like a blade. Your hands trembled, your heart clenched tight. Yet this time, the trembling didn't turn into weakness. It became fire. You clenched your fists and thought, "If I stay silent, I will forever remain a shadow. It's time to prove I am not weak." From that moment, your thoughts shifted. You no longer waited for an apology, nor did you hope for an embrace. Instead, you sat down, opened an old notebook, and began to write. Line after line spilled onto the page. Finances, hospital plans, ways to care for your child, jobs you might take later. Every word was a brick laid on the foundation of a new life. One evening, you stood before the mirror. The reflection showed a thin woman, dark circles under her eyes, fatigue etched across her face. But in those eyes, for the first time, there was steel. You allowed yourself a faint smile, not because everything was fixed, but because you knew. You were changing. You remembered your father's words, your mother's silence, your sister's faint smirk. They still pierced your heart, but they no longer had the power to crush you. Instead, they fueled you, transforming pain into strength. You understood. You couldn't change them, but you could change yourself. Sometimes you sat alone, listening to your baby's heartbeat, and wondered, "One day, if my child asks, 'Why did you have to leave?' How will I answer?" Close quote. You knew the answer could never be just tears. It had to be a story of resilience, of strength, of a mother who rose from the depths of pain. Do you believe that sometimes the most brutal events can ignite the fire of rebirth? If you were in such a situation, would you surrender or would you fight to rewrite your fate? From that pit of despair, you began to climb. The first steps were shaky, but each day you stood taller, steadier. And within those trembling steps, you discovered your true strength, a strength no one could ever take away. A strength born of pain, yet enduring, luminous, unbreakable. Time passed slowly, and each day felt like a new challenge. Yet within every breath, every step, you felt yourself moving closer to a milestone you would never forget. And then the day arrived, the day you held your baby in your arms for the very first time. Inside the small hospital room, you heard your child's first cry. That sound pierced through the heavy air and lit up your entire world. Tears streamed down your face, no longer tears of despair, but of joy, a release, of a brand new journey beginning. You whispered softly, "Welcome, my angel." In that moment, everything that had once hurt you, the room taken away, the cold words of your parents, the careless text from your sister faded into the background. You realized those losses had only been stepping stones that led you here, to this moment, where you could see your baby, touch your baby, feel the warmth of life in your arms. The first days of caring for your child were exhausting. Night after night, you stayed awake, rocking the baby in your arms, soothing every cry. Sometimes fatigue nearly broke you, but each time you looked into those clear eyes, strength returned. The first giggles, the tiny hands gripping yours as if never letting go, all of it became medicine that healed the wounds in your heart. You slowly began to understand a simple truth. Happiness doesn't come from parental approval or escaping comparison. Happiness comes in the quiet moments, like watching your baby sleep peacefully against your chest, or knowing you worked hard so your child could be warm and full. Sometimes, your mind wandered back to the past. You remembered your father's cold stare, your mother's silence, your sister's proud smile. But unlike before, those memories no longer left you breathless with pain. They became lessons. That sometimes, to find yourself, you have to walk away from the very place you once called home. Have you ever considered that what feels like complete destruction may actually be the beginning of rebirth? If you were faced with such loss, would you remain stuck in grief, or would you turn it into fuel for growth? You started building a new rhythm to your life. In the mornings, you woke earlier, finding part-time work while your baby slept. At night, you studied new skills, read books, wrote out future plans. Though your body ached with exhaustion, your heart carried a steady energy. Each small step reminded you. You were no longer living only for yourself, but for a little soul depending on you. Some days were brutally hard. You had to stretch every dollar, sometimes skipping meals so your child could have milk. Yet those very struggles carved resilience into you. You discovered that true strength wasn't about never falling, but about rising again every single time. You watched your baby grow day by day, almost as if time itself had slowed down, just so you could treasure every moment. The curve of a smile that lit up a tiny face, the trembling excitement of those first steps, the bubbling sounds that filled the quiet room with laughter, all of it became milestones carved deep in your heart. In those innocent eyes, you saw more than a child looking back at you. You saw a reflection of yourself, a soul once abandoned, yet refusing to surrender. And it was in that reflection that you finally discovered the answer to every doubt that had haunted your sleepless nights. Am I strong enough to keep going? Close quote. The answer, you realized, had been cradled in your arms all along. One afternoon, life confronted you with an unexpected test. Walking through the streets, you caught sight of your old family. Your parents. Your sister. They were there, unchanged, moving together like they always had, an image so familiar, yet so foreign now. They looked as if your existence had never left a trace upon them. Your heart squeezed painfully, a sharp reminder of the wound they had carved into you. For a moment, you expected the bitterness to rise, to consume you as it once did. But instead, something surprising happened. You smiled. Not out of scorn, not out of denial, but out of release. Because in that instant, you understood a truth you'd longed to feel. Your happiness was no longer bound to them. It was here, right in front of you, in the sparkle of your baby's laughter, in the fragile yet unshakable life you had built with your own hands. Have you ever witnessed how profoundly a person transforms once they become a parent? Before, responsibility felt like a chain, heavy and suffocating. But when life places a tiny heartbeat into your arms, responsibility transforms into a shield, into a sword, into wings. It stops being a burden and becomes a force that drives you to exceed every limit you thought you had. For you, motherhood was not simply a role. It was a rebirth. It turned the ashes of your pain into the soil from which something new could grow. That old room, the one you had been forced to leave, the space that once represented rejection and loss, was now nothing more than a fading shadow in your memory. You no longer needed it. You no longer longed for it. You had built something far greater. A home of your own. Perhaps it was modest, perhaps the walls were bare and the nights long, but every corner carried the echo of laughter, the warmth of resilience, the pulse of a love untainted by comparison or favoritism. Most importantly, your child would grow up wrapped in that love, surrounded by the strength you had earned, not the rejection you had once endured. Each time you watched your baby drift into sleep, lashes resting gently on soft cheeks, you whispered words only the two of you would ever share. Thank you for coming to me. You are the reason I stood back up, the reason I found my strength, the reason I discovered who I truly am. Those words, soft and quiet in the dark, were more than lullabies. They were confessions of gratitude, not only to your child, but to yourself for not surrendering, for daring to step into the storm, for walking through the darkness until you found the light again. And slowly, piece by piece, you began to see that life had not stripped everything away from you. It had not left you empty-handed. Instead, it had forced you to release what was never truly yours to keep. The house, the room, even the acceptance you once chased, none of it had been meant for you. Life had cleared them from your grasp, so that your hands would be free to hold something better. A new path, rough and steep, but real. A path that, though painful, led you to a form of happiness purer than anything you had known before. Do you believe that sometimes the most painful loss can secretly disguise itself as life's greatest gift? That behind the cruelty of abandonment, there can exist an invitation to uncover strength you never imagined yourself capable of. You lived through that paradox. You embodied it. What seemed like the end became the beginning. What once broke you gave you the chance to be rebuilt stronger, fiercer, more whole than before. And as you stood in the stillness of the night, your baby's breath rising and falling in rhythm with your own, you realized that this journey was not just about survival. It was about transformation. You had walked through rejection and grief, but you had emerged carrying something far more precious than pain. The unshakable knowledge that you were enough, that you could stand, that you could love without condition. In the silence, holding your child close, you finally understood. The road behind you was harsh, but it had carved a path toward a truth that could never again be taken from you. That truth was not about the family who had turned away, not about the room that had been lost, but about the life you had built with courage and tenderness. A life in which love was no longer a fragile hope, it was the foundation of everything. You had found that strength. It existed in every embrace, every step forward, every radiant smile when you looked back on how far you'd come. And you knew the journey was only beginning. But you had enough courage now to keep going, with the faith that light always waits at the end of the road. Your journey from being a daughter pushed out of her home while carrying life within you, to becoming a mother strong enough to build a home of your own, proves that loss is not always the end, but often the beginning of a new story. You endured dark days, sleepless nights, and countless tears you thought would never end. Yet in return, you gained a treasure beyond measure, the love of your child, and the strength that had always been waiting inside you. Now, when you look back, you no longer see yourself as someone abandoned. You are living proof of resilience. You dare to walk through pain to reach the light, and in that light, you discovered a peace